Hey y'all, it's Tim Miller from the Bulwark. I wanted to gather in one place just all of the lies that Donald Trump has been telling in the wake of this humanitarian tragedy of Hurricane Helene that has impacted Georgia, North Carolina, and Virginia. We've been talking about the political fallout. We've been talking about just what is happening on the ground in these states and how horrific it is. And we've mentioned Donald Trump's lies, but like when you really put them all in one place, it's really astounding just how this man has absolutely no empathy for others, how he is in the face of this horror is again only thinking about himself, always mendacious, always making shit up. And like when you compare it to how he acted when he was president, I just think it's pretty shocking. So I want to put all of these clips together one by one. And if you have a friend in your life who thinks that Joe Biden's falling down on the job and Donald Trump really cares about people, hopefully this can be a useful guide for them to understanding just how full of it Donald Trump has been when it comes to responding to these hurricanes. So first up, the other day Trump was talking about how Georgia Governor Brian Kemp couldn't even get President Biden on the phone, but that wasn't true.
We do need some help from the federal government. They have to get together, ideally with the governor. The governor needs to, he's been trying to get them, and I'm sure they're going to come through, but he's been calling the president, hasn't been able to get him. But they'll come through, I'm sure.
I just spoke. The president just called me yesterday afternoon. I missed him and called him right back. And he just said, hey, what do you need? And I told him, you know, we got what we need. We'll work through the federal process. He offered that if there's other things we need, just to call him directly, which I appreciate.
So there you go. Trump like mumbling, low energy Trump, kind of like, oh, he's obviously implying like Sleepy Joe wasn't awake or whatever, and Kemp couldn't get a hold of Biden. Just not true. Just a flat lie. Just like a total sociopath, just making something up. Kemp had already said, as you saw in the second clip, that he'd been talking to Biden, and Biden had been responsive. All right, so it wasn't just about Georgia, though. Donald Trump on his social media feed has been bleeding about how the Biden administration was denying aid to the more conservative, more MAGA parts of North Carolina. It's unclear what this was based on. Garrett Hake at NBC asked him about this. Let's watch that.
Democrats intentionally not getting aid to areas. What was that in reference to?
Governor Kemp did call.
Just take a look. Where's that coming from?
Biden did call Governor
Kemp yesterday. Any evidence for that, Mr. President?
Very difficult to hear his response there on that clip, Katie, but his answer was, take a look. Essentially, I've got nothing to show you right now. Go find it yourself. Another from the kind of Trump staple of responses when pressed on something like this. I tried to follow up with him a little bit further down the rope line, but didn't have any better luck there.
Okay, so again, Trump has no answer. This is, again, just like a total fabrication, a premeditated fabrication that he puts out on his social media feed. It's also pretty reminiscent of the fact that maybe Donald Trump is projecting a little bit. Maybe this is every accusation is a confession, is sometimes what they say about MAGA. Donald Trump oftentimes threatened blue states that he wouldn't give them aid after humanitarian disasters. And that's why, people like Gavin Newsom and Andrew Cuomo had to suck up to Trump during COVID, to make sure they'd get the resources they need. So in this case, Donald Trump is accusing Joe Biden of doing something in North Carolina that he did when he was president, but that the Biden-Harris administration is not doing in the wake of Hurricane Helene. All right. If you just needed one more piece of evidence that all of Donald Trump's accusations are false when it comes to the Biden administration not being responsive to Red America or to Republican politicians, here's Glenn Youngkin, Republican governor of Virginia, talking about how great of a working relationship he's had with the Biden-Harris administration.
I'm incredibly appreciative of the rapid response and the cooperation from the federal team at FEMA. I've been on the phone over the weekends with the senior FEMA administrator. The team has been deployed. We had our declaration of emergency process an expedited way over the weekend, was finalized yesterday.
Again, Glenn Youngkin wants to be president, I think, in 2028. So, I haven't been the biggest Glenn Youngkin fan, but kudos to him for just saying what is true. The Biden-Harris administration is being responsive. They're working together to get people the aid and recovery assistance that they need. He might get attacked by Trump over that. He might get attacked by MAGA for whatever, giving aid and comfort to the Biden administration. But that's an example of a politician you might disagree with on some issues, but at least he is saying what is true about what is happening in the wake of this hurricane. All right. In addition to that, I think it's important to remember how Trump acted when he was president in response to hurricanes. Again, a lot of these things that he's accusing the Biden-Harris administration of are things that he did. When you see on social media these posts from MAGA influencers and some far-left influencers talking about how the Democratic establishment is ignoring Red America right now. They're not giving them the aid that they need. They're instead too focused on Ukraine or whatever. That is not true. The disaster relief authorizations have been signed. Biden and Harris are trying to get all the resources that have been requested, at least thus far, to these states. Let's look at what Donald Trump did in 2017 after a different hurricane hit North Carolina, when the current and then Democratic governor of the state, Roy Cooper, was asking for additional assistance. Let's see what happened.
The federal government will only give North Carolina about 1% of the money he requested from Housing and Urban Development to cover disaster relief after Hurricane Matthew.
I was shocked and disappointed to see the paltry amount of money that was appropriated out of a $930 million request that was conservative.
All right, there you go. Only 1%. The Trump administration only gave 1% of the requested aid to North Carolina. And I don't know. In some of these cases, sometimes do states ask for too much money, or do they ask for money that isn't fully vetted, or are there obligations the federal government has to make sure that our taxpayer dollars is being spent wisely? Sure. If this is a situation where this was like a green eye shade Republican that just wants to make sure the funds are being used appropriately, okay, we could listen to that. That's not what happened. Donald Trump was just saying blanket no to a Democratic governor. Sorry. If you're not on board, we're not going to give you the relief you need. You get 1% of what was requested. The person that was leaving real Americans to suffer, the person that was forgetting about the forgotten man after a natural disaster, was Donald Trump. Donald Trump was the one that did that. There are plenty of policy complaints you can have about the Biden-Harris administration. This is not one of them. They have been responsive to the needs of the states following the damage wrought by this hurricane. All right. Then finally, there's the most famous example. We've all seen the pictures of Trump in Puerto Rico throwing the paper towels or whatever, and just how gross that was. But the more important thing is Trump then abandoned Puerto Rico. After going there for the photo op, he abandoned it. And then he bragged about how he's Puerto Rico's savior. He's the Jesus of Puerto Rico, Orange Jesus of Puerto Rico, did everything they needed. Wrong. The Puerto Ricans suffered following Hurricane Maria. And for years, they did not get the help from the Trump administration to rebuild that they needed. Here's a news story from over a year after the hurricane, giving the real facts about how Trump abandoned Puerto Rico.
I've taken better care of Puerto Rico than any man ever.
18 months after Hurricane Maria decimated Puerto Rico, President Donald Trump this week declared himself the savior of the island.
Puerto Rico has been taken care of better by Donald Trump than by any living human being. And I think the people of Puerto Rico understand it.
The governor of Puerto Rico, however, would beg to differ.
The people of Puerto Rico are concerned, are frustrated with the fact that recovery funds are flowing slower, that we're treated differently as second-class citizens in Puerto Rico. really what has gone to Puerto Rico has been about $5 to $7 billion of emergency work. That means everything that was to put roofs back on, to put the roads working, to pay the emergency workers. But in terms of the reconstruction, which is the big part now, the important part, how do we rebuild effectively for Puerto Rico? We've only have 46 projects ongoing, which is about $86 million.
There's a lot of material out there right now. Obviously, emotions are running high. There are always going to be complaints. The government can always do things better. But the lies, just the straight lies about how it's been Biden and Harris who are abandoning real Americans. Also, this thing is so ridiculous. And like the city that might have gotten this worst is Asheville, which is a huge blue bubble in the middle of Western North Carolina. So like the whole thing is a lie. The Biden-Harris administration has been responsive. They're working with Republican governors in the red states that have been impacted by this. And by contrast, it was the Trump administration that was denying aid and assistance to Democratic administrations and to places like Puerto Rico, where Donald Trump doesn't maybe feel like those voters are the types of real Americans that he considers to be real Americans. Maybe to him, the people in Puerto Rico are the ones that he said this week need to be deported so we can protect our culture. So it was Donald Trump who denied people aid based on politics. That is not happening right now with Biden and Harris. If you don't believe me, you can listen to Brian Kemp. You can listen to Glenn Youngkin. That is the truth about what is happening here. Do not fall for Donald Trump's lies. If you see people that are advancing lies about this issue, share this video and make sure they get the real facts. We'll be back here on this feed with wall-to-wall debate coverage. Make sure you're subscribed to the Bulwark. We'll be seeing you all soon.